Hello, and welcome to another edition of Sri's Sunday New York Times Read Along. Today is November 14th, and our guest is Linda Greenhouse, Pulitzer Prize winning reporter who covered the United States Supreme Court for more than 3 decades at the New York Times. She is still a New York Times columnist, a Yale Law School lecturer, and she's the president of the American Philosophical Society. She has a new book out, Justice on the Brink, which we'll hear about in just a little bit. Our host, of course, is Sri Srinivasan, the Marshall Loeb Professor at the Stony Brook School of Journalism and co-founder of Digimentors, a digital and virtual events consultancy. We're live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and our Digimentors website. My name is Neil Parekh. I am the executive producer and guest host of Sri's Sunday New York Times Read Along. It is a pleasure to be with you today. Thank you so much for joining. Please make sure to tag your friends, to mention them, to share it with them, retweet. Let them know we have an incredible guest today, Linda Greenhouse. I grew up reading the New York Times, of course, and I remember seeing her byline. It's another guest, and all credit to Carla Baranakis, one of our producers. Getting guests like this is just, to me, just incredible to have people with this kind of pedigree, this length of service at the Times is just incredible. So thank you, Carla, for that. Let's check in and see who's joining us before we bring on Sri. Jonathan Borstein is joining us from the East Village. Thank you, as always, for joining us, Jonathan. Our friend Doug Levy is excited to hear today's guest, as am I. So thank you, Doug. Doug is joining us from the Bay Area at 5:30 a.m. Pacific time. Always impressed when he does that. We have Philippe joining us on LinkedIn. Thank you, Philippe. Deborah Kerr watching from Fort Lauderdale. Thank you, Deborah, for rubbing it in a little bit. The weather in Florida is good. As Sri will tell you, it is cold in the Northeast. Patricia Freudenberg joining from New York. Hi, Patricia. Always great to have you join us. And there is Deborah tagging one of her friends, Jody Lashinsky. So thank you. Thank you for doing that. Deborah Bernick from Washington, D.C. Diane Stefani from Margate, New Jersey. Miriam Berkeley from Hell's Kitchen, New York City. Janet is watching from Providence. So she's thanking Carla for helping us get this guest. And always a special guest for me. Hi, Mom. How you doing? Thank you for joining, as always. Always great to have you join. And I'm thrilled in just about 2 weeks. My mom is coming down to join us for Thanksgiving. So we are thrilled. My daughter got her vaccine, her first shot. And so she'll be on the way to be fully immunized. So we're happy. Apollo is here from Philadelphia. Our friend Stephen Kaplan from Ramsey, New Jersey. And Suzanne is joining us from Atlanta. Thank you, Suzanne. So with that, let's take a look outside Sri's window. Is New Jersey, and there's Sri's thumb, at least. We have it's always great to see Jersey. Everything is legal in New Jersey, as we know, and there is Sri himself. Sri, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled that we could be here together on a Sunday morning, as we are every Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. But if you're watching us on the recording side, thank you for watching as well. Please tag a friend. They can watch us live or later. And we are on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and on LinkedIn. And we're super thrilled to have Linda Greenhouse with us. And we'll be able to talk about so much about what's happening in the news and her great new book. And we want to thank our production team. You've all met Neil already, our executive producer. And we have a magnificent group of folks who make this possible. Carla Baranakis, who you heard about already. Steve Taylor's in the house, at Steve DeReeve. Carla's at Kabara. Paula Kiger is at Big Green Pen. And Julia Weeks at Julia L. Weeks. Please follow all of them, and at Neil Parekh. This is the team from our Digimentors, the company that does different kinds of social and digital production, including consulting, conferences, summits, webinars. If you'd like a talk show or a book launch or anything like that, please get in touch with us. You can see our contact information. No event is too small or too big. And we're able to do all of this because of the support of all of you, as well as our sponsors. And we want to thank Muckrack for helping us out. Muckrack does really wonderful work for PR folks as well as journalists. Muckrack.com. If you're in the comms business, you need to check out Muckrack. And if you would like to be a sponsor, please let us know as well. And Neil, I know you're super excited, as I am. There's so much to talk about in the news. What I'm going to do is just quickly look at the paper, and then we'll bring Linda on.
Absolutely. That's great. And as Sri mentioned, I am really excited about today's show. But in addition to Linda, there's some really incredible stories in the paper that we'll get to in just a moment.
So on the front page, and I really want to hear Linda's thoughts on this, how the U.S. hid a devastating airstrike. Military skirted rules protecting civilians in Syria attack that killed dozens. This is in 2019. Climate summit reaches accord amid contention. So big story about the climate crisis, and we want to be covering that very closely. Belarus using Iraqi migrants as weapons, and trials spotlight the fault line in self-defense. And we have the dean of covering the trials and court cases, so she's going to be helping us understand that. District's focus on bias ignited fury in Virginia, and this is part of understanding what happened last week with the elections in the United States. The cover of the magazine, the New York Times Magazine cover, is all about housing. And it says, in Austin and other cities, the surging real estate market has forced regular people to act like speculators. Will home buying ever be normal again? And 1,000 pots of rice from Senegal to Mexico, a tour of the world via our favorite grain. It's certainly my favorite grain, but I'm surprised that for the Times, it's their favorite grain, I guess. Is wheat not a grain, Neil? How well do you know your grains?
I don't know grains at all, Sri.
Okay.
I would think wheat is a grain. I'm sure that our New York Times read-along viewers will let us know. And okay. Steve is telling us, our producer is giving us a thumbs up backstage. Wheat is a grain.
So for an American newspaper to say that that rice is their favorite grain, or the world's favorite grain, is it's certainly the world's favorite grain. Is it the New York Times' favorite grain?
That's the question. At the New York Times favorite grain, I think that you could argue in terms of the population of the U.S., rice might. We'll have to look this up. What gets more? I mean, wheat is grown certainly, but there's going to be a lot of people eating rice around the country, particularly with people from other countries, immigrants here in the U.S.
The book review cover is Fever Dreams. There are 2 books reviewed, including a book, Our Country Friends, by Gary Steingart, who is a terrific writer. Some of you know him. And the cooking section, speaking of food, the cooking cover is Sides Giving. Vegetarians have always known the truth. It's the sides that make the meal. And we'd love to hear your plans for Thanksgiving, folks. Chime in. Tell us what you've planned for Thanksgiving. Yemenis reclaim their coffee heritage. There's the metropolitan section that you can't get unless you are in this part of the country. And saving a farm that helped inspire the dream. And Martin Luther King's life of activism got an agricultural assist in Connecticut. I had no idea. Real estate cover, Up on the Roof, Climate Relief. And Arts and Leisure covers In the Footsteps of a Refugee Child. And I guess that must be a documentary or a movie that's coming out. And this movie, Little Amal, last month, the walk made over 140 stops in 8 countries at venues from refugee camps to the Royal Opera House in London.
Getting back to wheat, Carla said that she used to live near wheat fields in North Dakota, and that wheat has lost some of its popularity because of gluten sensitivity. So
look at that. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Carla. And the business cover is Few Rules, No Taxes, Where Crypto Mavericks Play, and this is about Ukraine's wild west of crypto. And yesterday I saw an ad for something called crypto.com, and Matt Damon is the spokesperson for it. I couldn't tell what it was an ad for till the ad ran. Till the logo ran at the end. What bosses really think about the future of work. We're very interested in that topic around here. And Sunday Styles, more than Mr. Britney Spears. I don't know who this is. Sam Asghari, the pop star's fiance, is working on his own path to fame. And Sunday Review, Balance of Power, is about Biden's outdated approach to foreign policy can't win in the 21st century by Anne-Marie Slaughter, who is a very respected voice in foreign policy issues. So this is going to get a lot of attention. So I think with that, Neil, I think we're ready to bring on our very special guest.
Absolutely. Our guest, to remind people who are watching the show, is Linda Greenhouse. She is a Pulitzer Prize winning reporter who covered the United States Supreme Court for more than 3 decades. And she is still a New York Times columnist, a professor at Yale Law School, and the president of the American Philosophical Society. So with that, we welcome Linda Greenhouse to our program.
Hi.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Linda, for joining us. We're thrilled to have you. As you heard already, you can hear it in my voice. I'm so honored that you would spend Sunday morning with us. Let me just start by asking, are you a Sunday morning person?
I am. I get up pretty early. I usually walk into town and buy the Sunday New York Times.
And now I'm just curious about how you handle the pandemic. What has it been like, and your family as well?
Yeah, so the pandemic in a strange way was kind of a gift to me, in the sense that it gave me time to write a book. So I started writing around the first of the year and turned in the manuscript for this new book, Justice on the Brink, beginning of August. So that could not have happened if I had been doing my day job or socializing like a normal person or whatever. And the other good thing that happened in my family is our daughter had a pandemic baby, Lizzie, born at the end of February. So she's now 9 months old. And so, we were very lucky. Have no complaints.
Congratulations. And yes, those of us who have been lucky through the pandemic are grateful for what we have been able to do, but we also note the terrible misery around the world, and it continues in so many places. And I've been so upset recently by the actions of folks like Aaron Rodgers, the terrific athlete but lousy human, who is now going to get to play today after lying about his vaccine status. And the state of Wisconsin, where he plays, is doing so badly right now, and it's really difficult to understand. This was my newsletter last week. Aaron Rodgers did his own research, and this is the thing, Linda, that everybody who is saying that they're doing their own research, when there's so much good news as well, we should acknowledge, including the fact that young kids can get the vaccine. And I know that our Neil Parekh, his daughter, got the vaccine, 8-year-old, and what a great feeling for him, but all of us, to see young people are able to get that vaccine. The youngest amongst us are able to get that vaccine. Even as in other countries, they are hesitating to roll out the vaccine for children. America is going ahead. But as you know, Linda, this means there'll be a lot of people in America who won't vaccinate their children because they don't think it's safe, or they buy into the garbage that's on the internet.
Yeah, I was in the Pfizer clinical trial early on, so of course I didn't know whether I had gotten the actual vaccine or the saltwater placebo. But I did find out. They finally unblinded me in January, and I learned I had actually gotten the vaccine, which I suspected because I had a little side effect. But anyway, so I'm all in for the science of this thing, and I struggle to understand. Well, I'll put that in the past tense. I struggled to understand people who are anti-vaxxers. I've given up that struggle because I just, frankly, I have no patience for them and for their selfishness and misguided attitude. So I don't even like to think about them.
Well, folks, we welcome all of you. This is Linda Greenhouse, and I'm very excited to have her on our show. When we put her credit on the screen, you'll see something unusual. We say that there is an account that many people do follow, including people who think that this is her account. It's Greenhouse Linda is a fake account, we're telling people, because we don't want you to follow it. It's somebody who is is not Linda. Let's start with that. But let me just point out that because she's not on Twitter, she has more time and she's not wasting the time that the rest of us who are on social media waste. So that's good, Linda.
Well, that's not to say I'm not online for many, many hours
a day.
Of course. I'm not a technophobe. I just decided not to bother with social media.
Good for you. Good for you. I tell folks that if it's a considered decision, that makes a lot of sense. Let's just see some folks who are joining us. Pradnya is watching from Silver Spring. Good morning, Pradnya, in the DC area. She's been a guest on this show on Mother's Day. And I see that Natasha is joining us from Puerto Rico, where we love to go at multiple times. Welcome. The weather is a little warmer there, I'm sure. And Natasha says there's a great case was seen recently by the SCOTUS on the SSI and Puerto Rico. So I'll need to do some research on that to understand the background of that particular case. And Carla Platter is watching from, Therese is watching from Yonkers. Welcome, Therese, great supporter and former guest on this show. And we see Carlos watching from Southwest Florida. I just got a booster and my 5-year-old got her first shot. So cool that you got to participate in a trial. That raises the question, Linda, did you therefore not get the vaccine when the rest of us did because they told you had gotten it already, so you didn't need at least the first dose? You got like only a regular second dose, is that correct?
No, I got 2 doses as part of the trial.
Oh, okay. So
one was on the 1st of September. Excuse me, I have to sneeze. 1st of September, and then 3 weeks later for Pfizer. And as I say, they don't, it's a double-blind study, so the experimenters and the experimented upon don't know what they call arm of the trial they're in, the vaccine arm or the saltwater arm.
Okay.
But
you had a clue because you felt something, so that you had a little bit of the side effects.
Yeah, I had a little bit of reaction to the second shot. So by the time they unblinded me in January, the vaccine was just being made available. Different states had different rules. I would not have been eligible to get it yet. In Connecticut, I think you had to be, 75 or something. But once they told me I actually had the real thing, I felt pretty good.
I believe that. Apollo is watching, a dear friend of the show. He said he's quoting me about Aaron Rodgers, terrific athlete but lousy human being. He's so dead I met the floor. Apollo says, and we have other people watching. Naomi, great friend of the show. Happy Sunday from the Upper West Side. Ellen's watching from New York City, and Patricia is watching on LinkedIn. So we're on all these different platforms, and says she's grateful for this. And Kevin Noblette, great foreign editor and a longtime editor at the Associated Press. Good morning, Sri and Linda from Frosty Barkhamstead in Connecticut. I don't know if I mispronounced that. And David K. Johnston, your colleague, former colleague, both of you at the Times. So welcome, David. Thank you for being here. And if you have any questions for Linda, something you've always wanted to ask her, why not ask it in public? And we'll bring you the questions. And anyone who has questions for Linda Greenhouse, please do ask and we'll bring them to you. We do want to tell you all about her book. It's got a wonderfully in-depth title, Justice on the Brink, The Death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, The Rise of Amy Coney Barrett, and 12 Months That Transformed the Supreme Court. And look at all these great quotes and reviews here, including by Larry Tribe, who is, of course, the legendary professor of constitutional law at Harvard Law School, who says that the book talks about the inner dynamics of the Supreme Court. and so it's a really important book. And Linda Greenhouse's surpassing ability to decode the Supreme Court and with consummate storytelling illuminate a truly watershed year. There's Martha Minow, another Harvard Law School professor and dean, and Linda is a kind of Gibbon of the Supreme Court, a chronicler of such perception and such depth that is difficult to imagine how we could understand this vital and opaque institution without her. As Americans, we are nearly overwhelmed by coverage of the presidency and of the Congress, but the court remains stubbornly elusive except to Greenhouse. And that's John Meacham, who is a fellow winner of the Pulitzer Prize. So everyone, please get this book. You can find it at your favorite bookstores, online, and of course, always we recommend supporting independent bookstores. So tell us a little bit more about the book, and I have some questions.
Yeah, so the book is a chronicle, month-by-month chronicle of this watershed year in the history of the Supreme Court, the first year with the 3 Trump justices. So it begins in July of 2020, at the end of the previous term, when Chief Justice John Roberts was riding really high. He was in the majority in every case that mattered. The court seemed to be his, I won't say playground, but it's the Roberts court, and he was the man in charge. So what happened? Of course, as we know, in mid-September of 2020, Justice Ginsburg died. And the quite norm-breaking, even shocking thing is that before she was even buried, Donald Trump had nominated a successor, Amy Coney Barrett. The 2020 election was already in progress in many states. There was early voting. People were voting. And on the eve of Election Day, she was confirmed for the first time in more than 100 years without a single vote from the minority party. Not a single Democrat voted to confirm this unusual nomination. And then I talk about what happened. So within 2 weeks of her coming on the court flipped on a very important question, which is, which gets dominance, the claim to the right to religious exercise or the claim of public health? So these were a series of challenges that had come to the court, challenges by churches and other religious entities to the capacity limitations that various jurisdictions had put on places where people gather indoors. So, in arenas, in malls, in places of entertainment, and in churches and houses of worship. So the claim was our religious rights are being violated because we can only have 60 people and we want 100 people, that kind of thing. When Justice Ginsburg was still alive, the court rejected these claims. Chief Justice Roberts writing, we're just judges and we're going to defer in this emergency to the people that really have some basis for knowing what they're doing, the public health experts. Amy Coney Barrett comes on the court. And as I said, within 2 weeks, a New York case like one of these came up, and the court came out the other way, 5-4. It had been 5-4 to uphold public health back in the spring and summer. All of a sudden, it's 5-4 to reject the public health claim and uphold the religious claim. And that continued throughout the rest of the term. The court really made new law privileging religion above other types of legitimate claims in civil society. So that was one of the most important things that happened. And of course, the year goes on. Election cases, Trump's challenges, the Stop the Steal campaign, and his justices do not play. He's furious. He gives speeches denouncing the court up until the eve of his departure, and afterward. So, we'll talk obviously a lot more in detail. I won't go into more detail now, but by the end of the term, when the court upholds some voter suppression measures in Arizona, we see what's happened in this very consequential year.
Well, thank you for writing this book. We really need a sense of understanding of what went on. I think we see a lot of coverage around this, but I think Kevin asked a very good question. Kevin Oblet, terrific journalist himself. How worried should we be?
Well, of course, depending on what our starting point is and what we feel about this. But, one major thing that happened in the last term is that the court, exercising its ability to set its own agenda, which of course becomes the country's legal agenda, agreed to hear Mississippi's appeal in its abortion case and agreed to hear a gun rights appeal in the New York gun case. The gun case was argued earlier this month. The Mississippi abortion case will be argued in December. And both of those figure to have outcomes that those of us who are very skeptical of the right to walk around with a gun and the supposed right to walk around with a gun and want to protect the right to abortion ought to be quite concerned.
Thank you. And there's so many other topics as well that I know people will need to be concerned about. So if we can talk for a minute about RBG and her legacy, someone like me who has admired so many good things she has done. I think we can also say at the same time that her refusing to step down, even after being taken to lunch by President Obama and being encouraged to step down after being sick and having multiple cancers, to me, tarnishes that part of her legacy, that the part of the reason we're here today is because she refused to step down when she had a chance. Is that fair? Is that accurate? I'd love your thoughts on that.
Actually, I think that's pretty overblown with respect, Sri. In any causation, any causal chain of events, it's where to begin, right? If President Obama had been able to fill the seat, Justice Scalia's seat, that Mitch McConnell blocked for 10 months, we would have had a progressive justice sitting in the seat that eventually went to Neil Gorsuch, right? I mean, where to begin with the chain of events that led to the now very conservative court we have? I kind of push back against the notion that I hear from people, a lot of, I have to say, male law professors, that, oh my gosh, Ruth Ginsburg's failure to retire when we told her to retire has led to everything that's wrong in the country today. Now, obviously, I'm overstating it, but also obviously that's kind of ridiculous. So I think the worst that can be said about her decision to keep going is that she placed a bad bet. She assumed, and I'd be curious to know who on this call did not also assume in 2016 that Hillary Clinton was going to be the next president. That was Ruth Ginsburg's assumption. I mean, shame on her, okay? That she would be free to retire in the knowledge that somebody would replace her with somebody that she would feel comfortable being replaced by. And the other thing is, if she had managed to hang on through her illness for another 4 months, President Joe Biden would have replaced her. So, it was bad luck. It was our bad luck. I'll say one more thing, which is that in those last 7 or 8 years, when she was being told every Monday and Thursday by a bunch of guys that she's the one who ought to take a bullet for the country and leave the job that she loved, she became the notorious RBG. Now, what do I mean by that? It was only in that period that she began to raise her voice in dissent, in the powerful dissents that we remember her for, with those quotable lines and so on, because until then she had been playing a very gentle game with the rise of the conservative Supreme Court. But once Sandra Day O'Connor retired, Sam Alito replaced her, the court was lurching to the right. We heard from Ruth Ginsburg very powerfully, and had she retired when they told her to, we would never have known that RBG.
Thank you. And that's absolutely all very important points. And you are, of course, the expert. And I will defer to you on that. But I will say that I am on the record criticizing Justice Breyer for not stepping down. And it isn't about because she was a woman and because he's a man. We're saying that Breyer needs to step down as well. And I think it's the same mistake is going to be repeated because he has said, and he thinks that the justices are not political. No one gave that memo to Alito and to Clarence Thomas and Gorsuch. And look at this, just saying all these names just tells you how much America has changed and the court has changed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fair point.
So we've got great conversation going here on the comments. We're going to bring in some of the comments. We're talking to the great Linda Greenhouse, and I'm already learning so much, as I know all of you are as well. Pradnya disagreed with me, but makes a point about the male justice. I will say the same thing I just said to Linda about that. And Ellen says it's fair and accurate. This is, of course, it's hard to know for sure anything that would happen, and that's an important point from Linda that she's saying. Apollo said, I was so scared in 2016. I knocked on doors for Hillary. I slept for 24 hours after the result. I do want to just go to actually what happened. So let's leave the RBG side of this conversation just to talk about her passing. And I'm just going to put on screen a tweet I wrote minutes after her announcement that she had died. I said, what a loss, an amazing life and career that changed America in so many ways. Let's hope Trump and McConnell don't try to force a successor through in the last weeks before the election. So I say that. And then my next tweet is, it didn't even take him 2 hours, because 2 hours later, this was the headline in the New York Times saying that Mitch McConnell, he will move quickly to replace her. Is basically lying and going against everything he had said at the Scalia nomination or the successor to Scalia. So your thoughts on that sequence?
Well, as I say in the book, what we later learned is that immediately after Ruth Ginsburg's death became known, McConnell called President Trump, who was on Air Force One flying back from a campaign event, and said to him two things. One, you've got to move quickly to find a successor. And two, that successor will be Amy Coney Barrett. So, the fat was in the fire before the rest of us even knew what had happened. And, a certain inevitability to the rank hypocrisy. I mean, this is a man who had said in at the beginning of 2016, oh my gosh, it's an election year. We can't let the president fill this unanticipated vacancy. Scalia died in February of 2016 because the people should make that choice. And here we had in 2020, the people were already voting. Some millions of Americans had already cast their ballots by that time. And, we saw what we saw. I mean, hypocrisy is too mild a word for what happened.
Thank you. And folks, please keep sharing your comments. We want to hear from you. And we're going to be reading the New York Times with Linda Greenhouse. If you're new to this show, every Sunday morning for 6 years, we've been reading the Sunday New York Times to celebrate good storytelling, accurate information. And we encourage you to subscribe to the Times or any other local paper, wherever you are in the world, because we need accurate information more than ever before. And we celebrate good journalism every chance we can get. Thank you, everybody, for being here. David K. Johnston, the great tax journalist and who's written about so many other topics as well, says the anti-vaxxers seem not just selfish, but ill-equipped for the 21st century with all its complexities. And that, I think, is also reflected in the political process and trying to understand how complicated the world has become. Do you feel that the justices that are now on the court, especially the ones that have just been added, because of their, in many cases, singular worldview, are they equipped for the complexities of our world?
Oh, you mean beyond the vaccine question?
Yeah, beyond the vaccine, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a fascinating way of putting it, Sri. They do live in a certain silo, for sure, many of them. But in a way, I don't want to give a pat answer to that question. It's a deep question. I mean, one thing about Supreme Court justices, as opposed to others in our system of government who exercise equivalent power, that is to say, great power, they don't have that much of a filter. They live in the world, they live in their own houses, they drive themselves to work. They're not surrounded by kind of the trappings of power. And Chief Justice Rehnquist, just on the eve of becoming Chief Justice, he had been an Associate Justice for 14 years at that point, gave a lecture, which was later published. And he said, we go home at night, we watch the news on TV, and we know what's going on in the world, and so we can't claim that we're totally walled off from the world. And I think that's true. But of course, in the very polarized media environment that we live in, I mean, Justice Scalia famously said he had given up his subscription to the Washington Post because the Washington Post was, quote, too liberal. So, really, you're living in Washington, you're part of the government, and you're not reading the Washington Post? It's almost unthinkable. So, some of these individuals, I think, have chosen to wall themselves off from the forces that are shaping our society today. And of course, that's very unfortunate.
Thank you. We have so many comments coming in about our RGB discussion. We don't have time to get into that. Everybody, please buy Linda's book, Justice on the Brink, and learn, as we all need to learn about what happened with that sequence. But we're also looking ahead to what's happening on the court today. I would like to just step back for a moment, if I could, just to understand from your point of view the options that President Biden has at his disposal. There's the talk of packing the court, et cetera. Can you just explain what can happen, or are we now destined to have the 6-3, 7-2 for a long time?
Well, you said, what options does President Biden have? I don't think he has any options as a practical matter. The notion that an increase in the size of the court could get through this Congress is zero. People talk about ending life tenure, which I think is a perfectly respectable notion to have. But I think the better the argument is that it would require a constitutional amendment, A, and B, of course, it wouldn't do anything about the current incumbents. So that would be a very long project. No, I think we're kind of stuck in the situation we're stuck in. I don't see any easy way out. Certainly nothing that's within the president's power to wave a magic wand and change things.
And he's announced a commission to study the issue, correct?
Yeah, there's a commission that was set up in the early summer and is going to issue a report, I think, imminently, having taken testimony from many people. It's a bipartisan, filled with, I think there's 30 members of the commission and very knowledgeable people. And I think, I think I don't mean to sound dismissive of it. I think it's a valuable exercise that will focus our attention on what we think the role of the court is, what we expect from the court. I'm looking forward to reading it, but it's not going to provide a key to imminent change.
Thank you. Our friend Mary C. Curtis is watching from North Carolina. She's been a guest on this show. And she says, despite her brilliant dissent on Shelby and voting rights, I do think RBG had a blind spot on race. She had very few Black clerks in her tenure, she says. And we've got many other comments coming in. Bird Yang disagrees with Sri about my comment on RBG. One often overlooks legacy with inspiring young girls in the past decade, and these young girls will make a difference when they grow up. Also, important point, Ron Thomas says that our justices are ill-equipped. They are living in another time zone. And Ron himself is in a different place. He's in Dubai. He watches us every Sunday. He's been a guest on the show in our apartment here in New York. So he's reflecting on what you were saying as well. So much great conversation. Natasha asked a specific question. What are your thoughts on Justice Sotomayor and her recent dissents?
Yeah, so Sonia Sotomayor has certainly stepped into the role that the, quote, notorious RBG was filling in those later years, she's become the court's truth teller. And, I think it's a very fascinating role. She, unlike Elena Kagan, who's the other justice who was nominated by President Obama, decided, she's not going to spend her time trying to persuade the unpersuadable among her colleagues. She's going to talk to the public. She's going to talk to history. So the dissent that I have found the most powerful came this past January at the end of the incredible 13 execution, she called execution spree, executions of federal inmates carried out by the Trump administration in its last 7 months. In fact, up to 4 days before Trump left office was the last of these 13 executions. And
just to get some context, do you have some other numbers to comparable periods of time?
The federal government had not executed anybody for the past 17 years. And during 2020, all the states together carried out only, I think the right number is 7 executions. And the Trump administration alone conducted 13. States have been turning against the death penalty. Virginia abolished the death penalty in this past year by legislation. The number of states who are actually putting anybody on death row is shrinking, and death rows are shrinking, but not for the Trump people. This obviously was an election ploy, first announced in July of 2020, the election year. But in any event, the court got last-minute appeals in all of these cases and could have exerted itself, but chose not to. And so Sonia Sotomayors called the court out, and she wrote an opinion that listed the names of everyone who had been executed, not to exonerate them. These crimes were not, some of these were really terrible crimes, but that wasn't the point. By this point, it was, the court might have had something to say about this. So she listed the names. It was a kind of a say their names, Black Lives Matter move, I think, just so that history would have an idea of what happened in the closing months of the Trump administration. And she's going to keep doing this. She has done it since then in the new term, in the current term. And that's the role that she's carved out for herself.
Thank you. We're going to get to the paper in just a minute, but we do have some comments coming in here. And Steve is annotating everything we're saying here on my Facebook and on LinkedIn. So it's a great way for people to get more context. And of course, also he's put in links to be able to buy the book of Linda's, and everybody should do that. Lots of other comments coming in here. I wanted to just point out this question from Eve. Why do we have only 9 people making decisions for so many? Who came up with this number? And just kind of the philosophical idea of this, if you can talk about for a minute.
Well, Congress came up with the number. I mean, to answer that very specifically, the first Supreme Court was 6, and that was felt to be not enough. So over time, Congress has the complete right to name as many justices as many positions as Congress wants to. So it's been 9 for 100 years. What was that? How do so few decide for so many? Well, that's in the nature of the judicial process. So whether it's 7, 9, or 11, you could still say, well, it's a country of almost 300 million. So what about that? But I don't think that's a real productive way to frame the question.
Thank you. Apollo says, I've never felt so held hostage. I cannot understand people's miscomprehension of our time. This is why I don't want to live in a religious state. Even political beliefs can be an axiom of religion, and it's just as oppressive. Killjoy times, man, he says. Let's talk a little bit about the other person in the title of your book, and that's Amy Coney Barrett, who came onto the scene, was identified by Trump as somebody he would nominate, and she has very strong religious views. And there was a time in this country where religion and the state were separated, and she absolutely believes that religion has an important place in our lives. So if you can talk about her a little bit, please.
Yeah, I don't demonize her, and I don't make assumptions about her that have not yet been proven out. So she's one of a majority of our current Supreme Court who I think wants to elevate the role of religion in our public life. She's not unique in that. And I think that's a major marker of the current Supreme Court that has elevated religious claims over claims of non-discrimination, whether against LGBTQ people or people with disabilities, decisions not in the immediate past term, but a term ago. And we've got a case in the current term. It's going to be argued next month that I think will have the result of opening the floodgates, sending public funds to underwrite parochial school tuition. So, she's part of a powerful new majority. But we'll see what exactly her view is, perhaps counter to the very aggressive stance that Justice Alito and Justice Gorsuch and Justice Thomas are taking on these issues. I have a sense from a couple things that she's written that she is in more of a modulated, maybe go slow mood about this. It's very fascinating. She's in a spotlight. She's in a very important position. But I think it's a little too soon to judge her as harshly, Shri, as your question kind of implied.
I'm guilty as charged. I have already convicted her in my mind because of the things she already did very fast and where we're going. But we'll see. She is. There's a reason Trump chose her and Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, and I have yet to see them. Unlike say Roberts, who has surprised us in some things over the last in recent years, but with so many things to talk about, we have a column that you wrote about Joe Biden. Tell us about that. We'll pull it up on screen.
Oh, so this was toward the end of last year, and I was trying to file some old papers, and I found a letter that then Senator Joe Biden had written to me, and it was very sweet. I think you can read his handwriting. Is the date is October 8th, 1987. Dear Linda, thanks. As someone said, I needed that, Joe. So what was this about? The fall of 1987 was the Biden, was the Bork hearings, the Supreme Court confirmation hearing for Robert Bork, nominated to the Supreme Court by President Reagan, and as people know, that nomination failed. And Joe Biden was chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. He was also, when the hearings began, a candidate for the Democratic presidential nomination for the 1988 election. His presidential campaign cratered when it came to light that he had given a campaign speech that plagiarized from a speech by a British political figure. And this was very embarrassing. And it started spinning out of control, and he withdrew from the race and walked into the hearing room that morning after having withdrawn from the race, and said something that I thought was very graceful. He said, look, my issues are behind us. Let's get back to work. And he conducted those hearings, I thought, with a great deal of gravitas, actually, which had not been a word that had been linked to Joe Biden during his Senate career. And so after the hearings, I wrote a little analysis of his conduct during the hearing. And, I knew him a little bit, but I didn't really know him. And I guess I did interview him for the piece about some of his thoughts. anyway, so this letter came. I'd totally forgotten about it. But when he said, as someone said, quote, I needed that, I think it's a little joke on himself for the plagiarism charge that had wrecked his presidential hopes. So.
Thank you. Let's talk about what they say will be the first line of when people remember you in the New York Times one day, many, many decades from now. The first line, Pulitzer Prize winner Linda Greenhouse. Tell us about how you won that and what that meant to you.
Well, I'll just say I don't think people decades from now are going to think about me at all. But yes, of course, that was exceedingly gratifying. It was for a category that I believe the Pulitzers no longer have, which was beat reporting, which I actually think is a great category. So it wasn't for any one piece. It was for a body of work. I think the deal was, you don't nominate yourself. So the paper had nominated me, and I think had submitted 10 pieces. I think that was the rule. So yeah, it was very thrilling. And our daughter at that time was about 12 or 13, and brought her to the lunch. And I thought that was, something nice for her to see. So somebody said to me, I think it might have been Bill Sapphire, the wonderful late columnist for the Times, who had been a Pulitzer winner. And he said to me, you won't find this life changing. You'll find it life enhancing. And I thought that was pretty cool.
Well, a couple of thoughts on that. I was there at the luncheon when I was working at Columbia Journalism School. Didn't get to say hello in person, but it was great to see you there. And that category was only given from 91 to 2006, so for a short period of time. But I can't think of anybody who did more justice, so to speak, to her beat than you. And for you to be recognized in that short period with it is really nice. And George Rupp was my boss's boss. And nice to see him in this picture as well from the Pulitzer website.
So let me ask you, why did they get rid of that category? It seems like such a good category.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, but I presume they are constantly re-examining the categories. And, I was thinking maybe it was because of all the media landscape changes, but this is back in 2006 when they got rid of it. So it isn't like they did it in response to social media or anything like that. So it was obviously something they thought about. The Pulitzers don't change very easily, as we all know. So I'm glad that you're in there, and everyone who won that prize, those folks all are very well known for their work in that category their beat.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I would think, like a health beat, or any kind of science beat, or foreign policy, or sports, or anything. Anyway,
well, let's tell people some of them. David K. Johnston won it for his coverage of the tax code, right? He's like the tax reporter. Gretchen Morgensen won it for Wall Street coverage, and she's a great writer of Wall Street. So you can see that these people who won it in those 15 years were amongst the best known for being really good beat reporters. Daniel Golden won it for his coverage of higher ed. And then he went on to do so many great stories before and after. So I agree with you. Beat reporting is important. And we certainly learned that during the pandemic, right? The folks like Apurva Mandavilli, who covers the pandemic at the Times, how important it is to have people who are specialists in topics and giving them the time and space to do that, as the Times is able to do in many cases. We have one more picture we want to show you. You won the award for the so he's looking here. There's the beat reporting category, so you can see Dana Priest won it, and lots of really good folks. But we do want to say that you won the All Deaf Prize for Justice in Action. That's the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund, and I had the pleasure of being on stage with you. I MC that dinner with Juju Chang of ABC, and that's me and my wife Rupa. And there you can see on the right There's Juju and there's Preet Bharara, who was a fellow honoree that night, and it was great to be there. And we auctioned off Preet's tie and raised money for All Deaf, which was fun.
Yeah, no, that was a wonderful event. I mean, I think I said in my brief remarks that I felt like an honorary Asian American, and I was happy to be one.
Well, we'll take that. We're going to do a time check. We have about 30 minutes left with the great Linda Greenhouse. Everybody, please tag a friend. They can watch now or later. She's answering questions right now. So please tag, please buy her book. Tell your friends to get it as well. It's called Justice on the Brink. And it's just come out, and you can see all the great reviews here and comments from some of the biggest names in journalism, as well as in the law: Larry Tribe, Martha Minow, and John Meacham. And the full title of the book is Justice on the Brink: The Death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the Rise of Amy Coney Barrett, and 12 Months That Transformed the Supreme Court. So what I'm going to do now is turn on my New York Times camera so that we can actually look at the paper, and we're going to read the paper together, and she will express her opinions on what she sees here, and then I'll just keep flipping through the paper. So Linda, I know you buy the paper physical copy where you live now, and that's pretty cool that you are able to still get the print paper. So before I read the paper, I just want to ask you, what did it mean for you to be at the New York Times full time for 3 decades? Now you still write for it, but it's a different relationship you now have.
Yeah, actually, I was at the Times for 4 decades as a full-time employee, 1968 to 2008. It was in the last 30 years of those that I covered the court. So, I haven't been a Times employee for the last, my math is very bad. I think it's 13 years. And I'm never in the building. My columns are edited by a very good guy who I've never met face to face. So,
well, wait, tell us about that. That's interesting. I mean, in a remote, now everybody does things like that, but not in those days.
Yeah, I mean, I started writing the column toward the end of 2009, and I've had several different editors who were on the op-ed editing staff. But Chris Conway's been my editor for a number of years, and if I ran into him on the street, I wouldn't recognize him. I'd never met him. But we do communicate quite effectively by email, and not infrequently by telephone. So,
but you've made it work. So there's proof that remote work works.
Well, I mean, the real proof that remote works is that I haven't physically been at the U.S. Supreme Court for a couple of years. Of course, nobody was there last year. The court was closed during the height of the pandemic, and the justices held their arguments and their meetings by telephone. But I couldn't do what I do, which is follow the Supreme Court very closely and teach about the Supreme Court, except that we live in a wired world. So the court's website is actually quite good, and people can navigate that site and find the status of every case, every pending petition, can read the transcripts of the arguments within a couple of hours, can read all the briefs. The difference between now and when I started covering the court, when it was just very hard to get the most obvious pieces of information that should have been public, and they weren't marked non-public, but they simply weren't publicly available. It's like night and day, and it makes it possible for the entire community of, you might say, court watchers or court nerds or whatever you want to say, to follow the work of the court.
Thank you, and thanks for sharing that. Let's look at the headlines. How the U.S. hit a devastating airstrike, and this is about something that happened in 2019 in Syria, and there was a cover-up that, of course, made things even worse. And the Times has acquired. This is a story by Dave Phillips and Eric Schmidt, and this very upsetting story. Your thoughts?
Oh, it's extreme. It's a major story. I mean, because the cover-up was at so many levels. I mean, what I don't have obviously any inside knowledge about this, but it sort of brings to light something that Dave Phillips has certainly written about, which is the rogue nature of these special forces. Just seem out of control. They don't seem to regard themselves as bound by the rules of engagement that are supposed to be, binding on military operations. And then, um, you know, everybody either dropping the ball through negligence or deliberately covering up what happened. It's a way that we're reminded so frequently about the need for a newspaper to be able to, the story says, piece together. I can't now find it, but the story was kind of pieced together over months from little bits and pieces of knowledge that came to these two very terrific reporters. So it's a major piece of work and a major scandal.
I hope that all the Republicans who were so upset about the way the Afghan engagement ended and and that terrible bombing that went wrong by the U.S. forces will now be as upset about this that took place under President Trump. And let's go on to another big story. Climate summit reaches accord amid contention and urging more help for vulnerable nations and delaying details on emissions. And here you see John Kerry and his Chinese counterpart. So that's an interesting development, and lots of comments coming in. Thank you everybody for writing in. We love seeing your comments. Story about Belarus using Iraqi migrants as weapons. So this is they're kind of, Belarus and Poland are in the middle of a very unusual international confrontation. And then districts focus on bias ignited fury in Virginia. And one of the things that I wanted to ask Linda about is that a lot of the stories around the culture wars, if they end up on the Supreme Court, as always seems to be the wish of the Republicans, they will typically get, at least they know where it's headed in a way that wasn't the case when it was a 5-4 court or in either direction.
Well, I think, yes, that's right. But I think it depends on, which aspect of the culture wars gets framed as a legal case that comes up to the court. I mean, I think the culture war now over the vaccine and the OSHA, President Biden's executive order through OSHA to have businesses with 100 or more employees to require vaccination. I mean, that's a culture war issue. And we saw, I guess it was Friday night, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit issued an injunction against that plan going forward, and that it's hard to think will not come up to the Supreme Court. And I wouldn't like to predict the outcome of that. And it's framed as public health, but we know that really it's a political and culture war against the administration by these carried forward by the Trump judges who are on these lower courts.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to jump in really quickly. I live in Virginia, I live in Springfield, Virginia. This certainly was a huge issue, and now Governor-elect Glenn Youngkin made it so. We're going to be picking up on this next week when we have Walter Greason and Kay Whitehead join us. We're going to be talking specifically about critical race theory and the 1619 Project. The 1619 Project book is coming out this week from the New York Times Magazine. So Walter and Kay will be joining us to talk about it, and I'll be guest hosting next week. So wanted to make sure people knew about that very special episode.
Thank you, Neil. Let's talk about the story about the trial spotlights, the fault lines in self-defense, Shyla Dewan's piece about the Kyle Rittenhouse, and a story in the Ahmaud Arbery story as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't actually have anything to add on those. I followed them just as a consumer of the news, but I think they each have, kind of weird things going on. So I think I'll refrain.
Sure. Thank you. Though I got to say, the judge in the Rittenhouse case is not even trying to hide his bias, which is very upsetting. All right. Let's look at the headline from 1940. Walt Disney's Fantasia motion picture history was made last night. The Times reported in a rave review following the world premiere of Disney's long-awaited animated classic set to classical music. And this is the movie was later criticized for its use of racially insensitive characters, and on the streaming platform Disney Plus, it now includes a warning that the program includes negative depictions and or mistreatment of people and cultures. And that's, of course, when you view things, you will view art made of a different era. People then, of course, notice how the world has changed, often for the better. The Times in your 40 years has gone through so many changes. One of them is clearly how much more servicey it has become. There was always a service element, but now look at this very specific, how to make your home feel like a cozy cabin. And in the winter in Massachusetts, I'm sure you have some tricks to provide as well.
Yeah, I love the little service thing. Especially, I guess it's every Monday. Does Vanessa Friedman have little tips on fashion?
Dressing? Yes, on your wardrobe. Yes, I love that too. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I always read that, and they often have recipes, and I love the Times recipes. I cook from them all the time, so I quite often, clip one of those. So yeah.
Nice. Here's a column or an essay, I guess, or no, there's a story. In Atlantic Canada, a tide of come from away. So that's a phrase that they use in parts of Canada. So someone who's come from away, meaning not a local. And we've seen this all over America as well. City people escaping to rural and suburban America or suburban Canada. And have you seen an influx of people where you live, and how have they been received?
Oh, totally an influx, and it's been received with great pleasure, because the Berkshires of Western Massachusetts have been losing population because it had been a manufacturing area. GE had a big plant here that went away about a quarter century ago, and so on. So families have been moving in. The school population has gone up after years of declining. Housing prices have skyrocketed, which of course is good for some people and not good for more people.
And people who need to work in the stores and things like that.
There's a real problem here of affordable housing. And it's a vicious cycle. If there's not affordable housing, there's not people available to work. And if there's not people available to work, you can't have new businesses. And so, that part is very disturbing. But the fact that there's more kids in the public schools is really a good thing.
Thank you. One of my friends in Newton, Massachusetts was telling me that his local Starbucks, it closes now at 2:30 p.m. because there's not enough staff.
Wow. Yeah.
Potential Marcos Duterte ticket starts to emerge in the Philippines election. Sudan police open fire on protesters, killing 5. I kind of brushed past it here, but this is the inside 2 amazing pages about the terrible story about America hiding what it did in Syria after killing civilians. And Climate Summit, more stories. A UK-US split screen of Meghan's 2 images. And this is about the princess. Well, I guess Prince Harry, and make sure she's no longer a princess, I guess.
Right.
So he's still a prince, but she's not a princess anymore. Or was she ever a princess? I've forgotten all of this already.
She was a duchess. Yeah.
She was a duchess, but she's not identified like that, at least in the title.
Right.
All right. With ancestral land a toxic dump, a tribe seeks a solution, lobbying government to fulfill responsibility. And by the way, as we're flipping through this, if any famous Supreme Court cases have, bring up any memories for you, please do jump in if you think of anything. Let's see, the spotlight of self-defense. Apprentice contestant ends Trump defamation lawsuit. So at least one of his many court cases over. Let's see. What do you make of the Times doing the neediest funds, the neediest cases, and what role do journalists, do you think, have in raising money and helping the communities they serve?
Well, of course, this is part of the legacy, I think, of the Sulzberger family. I mean, a Times publisher, probably 3 publishers ago, when I was a kid, I used to pore over that. There always was a special section of the stories of people in need who exemplified, different kinds of needs, and I would pore over those as a kid. So, I mean, there's a great, heritage of that in American journalism, and I think it's a good thing.
Shatner crewmate on trip to space dies in plane crash. I heard about this story. A 49-year-old software exec died, and he was with William Shatner when he became the oldest man in space. And here's someone else with a book out. It says it's not a book about Trump, but Chris Christie weighs in on what led to the Capitol riot. And then we see lots of ads for these things of the top powerful lawyers, best lawyers, all of that. Some of it is marketing, right? Some of it is PR. Some of it may be that these are, in fact, the best. I don't know.
I think it's all marketing.
New book delves into a Navy SEAL accused of war crimes. This is a book excerpt, which I don't think you see very often in the Times news pages.
Oh.
So this is Dave Phillips, whose byline's on the front page. Grace Malouf is actually, I'm not sure what's going on here, but it's instead of writing an article, I guess they just running this. And what do you make so far of the relationship between Nancy Pelosi and the Biden administration, and what are your thoughts?
Well, I think Nancy Pelosi's amazing, and she's got a pretty impossible job of herding cats, aka the Democratic Party. So, I mean, more power to her.
All right, we have only a few minutes left, so I'm going to just go ahead here to the obits. And I love reading obits. Are you an obit reader?
Oh, actually, I'll confess, obits are the first things I read in the paper. I turn to them right away. I find the written obits wonderful. I love the obit writers. I wrote obits myself as a young reporter for the Times, and I learned a ton from doing that. And I read the paid obits, the small agatype paid obits, because I find some of them are fascinating. There's humor in them, and pathos and history. Yes, I got an entire page. If we were not,
and do you have obits that are been written and filed, and your byline might show up in those obits? Yeah.
Yes, several of the justices. Several have run already: Ruth Ginsburg, John Paul Stevens.
Sure. And have you? Do you get to do the justices sit down for interviews about their obits in advance, or no?
No, I never did that. I think some people do sit down for obits. You'll see in the obit, in an interview for this obituary, 15 years ago or whatever. But no, I've never done that.
We saw a nice note from Roberta Oster watching in Virginia. She says, "Thank you for this great discussion." And that's all Linda. Here are some world famous brands had people die. The Fortunoff brand, and Elaine Fortunoff has died. And then Graham Edge, who was co-founder of the Moody Blues. And Stephen Mark Klein, 70 fashion arbiter, and Gadfly and archivist is dead. So another story there. We love to tell people about an app called Miss You Graham, which is a great way to remember and honor people who've passed away. You can find it on iOS and on Android. Are you a sports fan?
Not actually. I mean, my favorite sport is thoroughbred horse racing, and I have to say, the Times has cut way, way back on its racing coverage, to my sorrow. I mean, they hardly pay attention to the Saratoga season. And so, I'm sad about that.
We had your Times colleague, Sarah Maslin-Nier, on one of our episodes, and she wrote a book titled Horse Crazy, and all about her interest in the world of horses. And folks, you can find our archive of all our guests on my YouTube channel. So just go to youtube.com/3net, and please subscribe when you can. We'd love to have you share this episode with your friends and family. Tag somebody. They can watch us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. One thing I wanted you to comment on, if you could, is the use of photography and the use of color, and how much even, what you would expect to be a more, maybe not as, or more staid business section. Look how powerful they are with the pictures and how they use the pictures.
Yeah, it's an amazing transformation. I mean, I remember when color came to the New York Times, that was a big deal, and it was not without controversy, actually. Maybe 35 years, I don't know, you would know the date, but yeah, I mean, the only thing that I'm not crazy about, frankly, is the review section and how the front of it has become just a sort of a piece of art. I mean, isn't there enough to write about and what happened in the past week that they could fill that with a couple of stories?
Well, you're talking about the book, the Sunday review. So you're saying this page, you would like to see more content rather than just the picture. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, it's become, I don't know what it is now, frankly. What's the date on that?
Neil will tell.
It's a history piece, yeah.
97, yeah.
97.
Yeah.
Wow, that's more recently than I would have guessed. But
and then we're looking here at Tea, the Time Style magazine, 1,000 Pots of Rice, and you said you cook, so we'll show everyone. Let's see here if I can find it. Somewhere here is the cooking sections.
Yes.
Special edition on Sidesgiving. What are your Thanksgiving plans, if you would care to share?
I'll just say about the recipes. So those were online earlier in the week, and I printed them out, and I have such a pile of recipes that I printed out from the Times. It's kind of getting out of control. So we're going to Martha's Vineyard for Thanksgiving. My sister and her husband have been living there during the pandemic, and so there'll be four of us, and we'll cook some traditional things, and then I think also the rest of the week eat a lot of fresh fish from the fish market in Menemsha.
Lovely. We do mixed Thanksgiving and immigrant Thanksgiving, which especially Indian families is turkey with a lot of this stuff plus Indian food, and then the turkey turns into a curry the next day.
Oh, that sounds great. I love Indian food, and the Times has had recently some good recipes of there was one, I think there's one in that collection for a vegetarian squash recipe with all kinds of Indian spices.
Nice. Yeah, kaddu. My God, they use even the Hindi word for pumpkin or squash. Yeah. And that's kaddu. That's here. And this is from Priya's book, Priya Krishna, who's at the Times, a book called Indianish, which we recommend to everybody. My son loves cooking, and he has all these food books there. He's only a teenager, but he loves cooking, and Priya's book is there as well. So we recommend that to everybody. And Linda, when you're in New York, we should take you to lots of new Indian restaurants, so you'll have a choice of fun place to go. And this is, by the way, speaking of Indians, Tejal Rao, who's a restaurant critic at the Times, helped put together this section. Clearly, that's fun to see. Yeah. The book review, Fever Dreams, reviews The Sentence by Louise Erdrich and Our Country Friends by Gary Steingart. And then we'll just look at
my editor at Random House for the new book also edited that novel, and he's crazy about it, and he's sending it to me.
Oh, this is the Gary's book.
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome. And then here we talked about how home prices going up. You're seeing that on the Times Magazine cover as well. And David says, spot on, Linda, about oversized art, which means less text. So you're thinking alike over there. All right, we're almost out of time. So we are so grateful to Linda Greenhouse for being with us. Linda, maybe you could share some final thoughts about the book and what people will learn, even close readers of your columns and your writing for the last 30, 40 years, what they will learn from this book?
Well, I think one thing I'd like to leave people with, so the book, there's a sense in which the book is a snapshot of a year, but what I try to do in it is dig deeply to show the origin of the issues that the court dealt with, and also to suggest how the court has planted seeds that will blossom in the very near future. So people can read it as, here's what happened in this one year, here's why it happened, how it happened, and here's what it portends for the future.
Terrific. Was there anything that surprised you when you were able to delve into writing the book that you hadn't thought about before?
Well, I truly was shocked by the flip on the COVID public health measures. I would not have thought that this Supreme Court, with the conservatives, with their mantra against judicial activism, would actually have interposed themselves between the public health authorities and the health of the public and overturn these time-limited, very modest restrictions on public gatherings. That kind of shocked me.
One of the things, of course, that's a core conservative principle is that the government shouldn't interfere with businesses, but we find that when it suits them, they're all for mandates and things like that. What should we be looking for with the Supreme Court this season and next? Can you talk about that? And we did mention Justice Breyer a little bit. Do you think he will stay or will he leave?
I wouldn't presume to know what he's thinking, but what I do know is, I think we're about to enable more people walking around with guns in the New York case that was argued earlier this month, and the right to abortion, as we have known it for almost half a century, is not going to be the same. I mean, whether they're going to formally overturn Roe against Wade or simply functionally overturn it without not quite admitting it, that I don't know. But I know that the reason they took the Mississippi appeal in the 15-week abortion ban was because they want to do something with it, and they've got the votes.
How much do you think public opinion matters to justices, even if you can't tell these justices in the past? Do they care if the country is 80-90% for something, 70% for something? Should they consider it, or should it be true to their principles? What is your opinion?
Well, I think it's very hard to make a blanket judgment on it. I think for those who have an agenda, this is their moment, and they're not going to care. They think they're right. I mean, I'll credit them with that. I think they sincerely think they're right, and they're going to do it. I think Chief Justice Roberts is attentive to what the public thinks. He's not necessarily guided by it for things that are on his agenda. He's not a big fan of the Voting Rights Act. We know that from his opinion in 2013 and the Shelby County case, from his participation in the majority in July in the Arizona voting rights case. So, this is an ever more delicate and central matter to our democracy. And the court's majority really didn't seem to much care about that. So, as I say, it's very hard to give a real answer to that general question.
Sure, of course. One thing we'd want to do is we have you for a couple more minutes. We're going to give you a little bit of break to ask you two things. One, and we'll come back to you in just 2 minutes. One question is, one more time, we'd ask you to just tell us about the book, so for the people who are tuning in late. And second, we have a lot of young people who watch and journalists who are interested in journalism. So one of the things we'd love to get from you is some kind of pro tip, a tip for journalists that you'd like to share. Can be as short as you like. And we'll come back to you in 2 minutes for that. And then we'll get you out of here just before, as we promised, by 10 o'clock. So thank you. And folks, that's Linda Greenhouse. And I'm so excited, as you all know, to be interviewing her. I'm going to ask Neil to come back on screen so that we can thank some of our wonderful teammates, starting with Neil, for doing such a great job on this show. We have another great episode coming up next week talking about the 1619 project and many aspects of that. Our guests are going to be some folks who know so much about this topic, Sonia Whitehead and Walter Greason. We're grateful to both of them for being here. And folks, we're here every Sunday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern, and it's recorded and available on all these platforms right away. As soon as we're off the air, you can join us to watch it again. And we want to thank our team. Steve Taylor at Steve DeRive is with us. Carla Barnack is at Kabara. Paula Kiger at Big Green Pen. Julia Weeks at Julia L. Weeks. And Carla puts together a very important newsletter that I recommend to all my students and to all journalists. It's called The Local Connection. Subscribe for weekly story ideas and pro tips for local reporters. bit.ly/local news tips. bit.ly/local news tips. Please take a look. It helps you understand national stories, international stories, and how to localize them. And you will enjoy reading that. So please take a look. And Neil, what a great episode.
Absolutely. It's not over. We're going to bring Linda back on in just a moment, but we want to just share some of the comments that we had. Therese Steiner was saying, Linda, thank you for your dedication to truth and justice and illuminating us all. Apollo says, thank you for the read along community. Have an awesome week. We showed Roberta's comment earlier. Can't wait to read the book. So we have at least one sale today, Linda. My mom also thanks you. It's very nice having you, and thanks for sharing all of the stories. Jessica Yang, thank you. Hope you can write another book on the current blockbuster Supreme Court term. So we'll see whether another book is in Linda's future. And Liz Pressman as well, saying this has been a wonderful show. Thank you to everyone. Just purchased Linda's book on Audible.
So I'd like to ask her about that. Did she do the narration, or did someone else? Let's bring her on and let's talk to her.
We'll bring her back on, and that could be the first question. Linda, you saw some of those great comments from people really appreciating your time with us today. That question about the Audible book.
Yeah, I have to say, I love audiobooks. I'm addicted to them. And I was very happy when Random House, was going to put out the Audible edition. I did not read it. They gave me clips of 4 women professional readers and asked me to indicate my preference. And the one who kind of sounded most, I don't know, conversational and natural, that I liked the best, they offered it to her and she accepted. So I haven't heard it yet myself, but I'm sure she's very good.
I'm sure on the drive to Martha's Vineyard, that could be on the
Actually, what we're finishing up is a 20 CD version of the old Stephen Ambrose book, Undaunted Courage, about the Lewis and Clark journey.
Wow.
Because my husband and I are taking a Lewis and Clark trip in May. It was supposed to be last year. It was put off because of the pandemic, and it's back on in May. So we've been spending our free time studying up for that trip.
And look at Liz's comment. I'm legally blind, so this is a real gift. Linda, you should tell your publisher that you got that kind of comment. That's so special.
Oh, I gather audiobook wildly popular, and I certainly know why. So, yeah.
Well, thank you. And Patricia says, "Yay! I'm also an Audible fan. Have a few hundred in my library." And that's great to see. So we're going to let Linda go by asking her quickly to tell us about the book one more time, and then a tip for journalists.
So the book, Justice on the Brink, is the story of the Supreme Court term with the 3 Trump justices, unpacks what happened that year, why it happened, what the implications are for the immediate future of the court and the country. Tip for journalists, I mean, writing as I have for many years about material that strikes many people and is in some respects, technical and kind of obscure and remote. The question to ask that I internalize is, okay, if I'm my ideal reader, in my case, of course, I was lucky to have the New York Times reader, what does that person need to know to understand not only what happened, but the context in which it happened and the implications for this event? So just tell it in a way that it's going to make sense to people without, sugaring it up with, anecdotes or things. Just tell the story. And when I retired, I got a lot of mail. The nicest note I got from a reader I didn't know was, "Thank you for never talking down to us." So I kind of cherish that, assume the intelligence of your readers and their willingness to learn from you and be their teacher.
Thank you. That's so well put. They say, don't underestimate their intelligence, but don't overestimate their knowledge. And you've done that so beautifully. And Debbie Bernick, who's watching from the DC area, says, there's an important book for us justice junkies. Thank you. And I consider myself a lightweight justice junkie, so I didn't know that was what I was. But thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. We'll see you everyone next week.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.